In the year 10,191, the human race is capable of advanced space travel and visits all kinds of places in the universe. Each planet is a different nation with empire. One of these planets is Orak, which has a surface made of a very harsh desert and contains the only source of spice, a rare and valuable substance that extends human vitality. This Orak is considered the most valuable planet, regardless of the desert, and all the noble houses wish to rule it. Spice harvesters that the locals call outsiders come to Oris to ravage the land during the night to have treated the local people cruelly as they've colonized the planet for its supply of spice. The Harkonnen family came to the planet many years ago and currently controls the spice production, which has been known as the Freemen. Always try to attack the spice harvesters in an effort to drive them away. But these warriors are never strong enough to win. However, one day the Emperor sends a decree that knows why. Meanwhile, in Caladan, Lady Jessica and her son, Paul of House Atreides, are having breakfast. Jessica wants her son to practice a power known as Bene Gesserit and people. Paul tries to use it on her and fails, but Jessica reminds him, it takes years to learn. She also asks if he's had any dreams. And Paul thinks about the visions of a girl. Paul learns more about Arouse, which is plagued by powerful sandstorms and giant sandworms. Long exposure to spice has given the Freemen their characteristic blue eyes, and they consider spice to be safe spice to help navigators travel the stars. Sometime later, Paul and his father, Duke Leto, welcome the Herald of the Change, who has come with orders from the Emperor House of Trades. Duke Leto accepts and seals the deal with his ring afterward. Paul meets with Duncan, the sword master of House of Trades. Paul asks Duncan to take him to Oris with him and his team, but marshaled. Paul tells Duncan about the promontory dreams he's had of Oris, explaining he's seen Duncan with the Freemen and dying in battle. However, Duncan still says no because he doesn't. Paul goes to see Leto to ask for permission to go with Duncan, but Leto also refuses because Paul must be at his side when the family arrives in Orak. He fears a war is coming. To forge an alliance with the Freemen. Later, Paul trains at sword fighting with Gurney, the war master of House Atreides, who is angry because Paul doesn't take training seriously and force it to prevent the blades from penetrating. They fight for a few minutes and end in a tie, which would have been a mutual death without the shields. Gurney warns him how vicious the Harkons are, so Paul should be ready for war. The home world of House Cairn Robin visits his uncle, Baron Harkonnen, to tell him that all of their ships have left Furious. He yells as he wonders why the Emperor did this to them. But the bear isn't always a gift back in Caladan. Jessica wakes Paul in the middle of the night because Reverend Mother Gaius of the Bene Gesserit school is here and wants to meet Paul. Apparently, checks Paul's vitals, and he uses the chance to whisper to Paul that while the Bene Gesserit claim to serve the greater good, they also serve their own agenda. Then that Paul's heart is strong. The secret on their way to see the Reverend Mother. Jessica uses sign language again to tell Paul to remember his training when they enter the room. Reverend Mother Gaius orders Jet to do everything the Gaius says before leaving. Paul is angry that Gaius gave an order to his mother, but she uses the voice to draw him closer and force him to his knees. Then Gaius instructs needle to his neck. If he takes his hand out of the box before she tells him to, she will kill him with a needle. Paul begins feeling unbearable pain, but as Jessica recites of the desert and keeps his head up, Paul passes the test and is allowed to take out his hand, which is uninjured. Gaius tells him that if he had been unable to resist his impulses like an animal, too much power from his mother. Then she asks him about his dreams. So Paul tells her about the girl in the desert afterward. Gaius leaves. But on her way out, Gaius removed the rules. That's why Paul had to be tested. It turns out Jessica had been instructed to bear only daughters, but her pride made her believe that she could give birth to the chosen Messiah. At that, Paul overheard their conversation. He accuses the Bene Gesserit of steering the Imperial politics from the shadows. But his mother tells him there's more to it than that. The Bene Gesserit has worked powerful enough to bridge space and time, the past and the future. They believe Paul might be that person, but Paul is sad that he's just part of a plan. Soon, the family packs everything up. Freeman and Paul wonders what they're saying. So Jessica explains, they're calling him Messiah in their language. After a long flight over the desert, they make it to the city of Aro, which is in his room. Paul learns more about the planet to avoid attracting sandworms. The Freemen cross the desert using the sand walk, a special walk that mimics the natural sounds of the desert floating machine used by assassins entering through a small hole in the wall. The device flies toward Paul only to stop as they stare at each other. When a servant enters the room, Paul snaps it afterward. The guards are alerted and they find the assassin dead inside a wall. He'd been cemented into a crevice 6 weeks before and had been waiting for the right time to strike. And Peter to bring a message from the Emperor, who has promised to strengthen Heron's forces with his own elite military force, the Sarkar, but nobody can know about it. The sister also tells them to be kept alive. Harkonnen gives his word that he will not harm them. But after she leaves, the Baron tells Peter to kill the whole family anyway. Sometime later, Leto and his because it seems they were sabotaged by the Harkons. So they'll have to wait for the Judge of Change to oversee the process. At that moment, Duncan arrives and tells them about his mission on a Russum located in tunnels below ground that Harkon didn't know of. Duncan has also brought STG, the leader of a Freeman tribe, to meet the Duke after Leto greets him. STG spits on the ground in his culture, and Leto returns the gesture. Stilgar tells them that they are outworlders who take spice and give nothing in return. So Leto responds that he knows the Freemen have suffered and this is honorable, and turns to leave. But Paul asks him to stay. Sadly, Stilgar can't stay. But he tells Paul in his language that he recognizes him afterward. Dunk a pair of compass which can tell direction, despite magnetic interference. Sometime later, Leto and his people meet the Judge of Changer Kinds and her attitude almost gets hurt. The still suits they're wearing to make sure they're in good condition. Otherwise they won't survive in the desert. Suddenly Kynes notices the way Paul is wearing his boots in a non-standard fashion and then Kynes takes them to see the harvesting fields aboard 3 aircraft. A harvesting crawler is harvesting spice from the surface while a spotter is on the lookout for sand waves that they're attracted by noise and vibration. They can't use shields because those attract worms too. At that moment, Leto spots a sand wave and Kynes calls for a carry-all to retrieve the crawler, but a malfunction causes the carry-all to fail at picking up the crawler. This means the crawler's crew is in danger. So Leto decides that they will use the 3 aircraft to save them as soon as orders his men to throw out the shield generators to make room. Then he calls out over the radio for the men to leave the crawler and come aboard. The carry-all flies away as the worm comes closer. However, he suddenly freezes when he falls into a trance. Leto is about to take off when they realize Paul isn't on board and the worm is almost there. Now, Paul falls whispering to himself. Luckily he's pulled from his daze by Gurney. And together they begin running only to be knocked down as the worm starts to break the surface, causing the sand to sink into the aircraft, which flies away as they watch how the sandworm swallows the crawler whole back at the base. Leto tells Kynes that she must realize that the Harkonnens left them faulty equipment to was merely old afterward. Paul is examined by Yue, who says that Paul seems to be sensitive to spice but he'll be fine. After Yue leaves, Paul tells Jessica that he didn't had a vision. He describes what he saw about the desert, the war, and even kissing Cheney, saying that it was confusing because he saw what he thought was his death. But wasn't. He all shocks her because she just learned about it. Meanwhile, on the planet Sessa Secundus, the Sarar army is getting ready to depart under Peter's observant eye in the evening. Yue visits Paul and leaves him. Some moments later, some guards hear a noise and a mysterious person suddenly shoots them all before entering a room and lowering the base of shields. Leto wakes up and realizes something is wrong. When he finds a body, he tries calling security but gets no response. After activating his shield, he turns the body around and finds the servant with a dagger in her chest, penetrating Leto's shield and knocking him unconscious. The mysterious figure person comes out then and reveals it's Yue. Soon Gurney is also awakened and learns that the shields are down. Ship hovering in the sky, and he orders his forces to get their own ships off the ground. Explosions begin going off all over the place as the enemy forces bomb the base while anti-aircraft ships land and disembark soldiers. So Gurney and his men rush to fight them hand to hand at the main steps. A group of Atros men is keeping the invaders at bay, but suddenly they're surrounded and annihilated. He wakes up but can't move. Yi explains that he's made a deal with the Baron to turn Leto over because the Harkins have his wife hostage after getting Leto's ring for Paul. Yi implants a fall bites down on it, it'll fill the air with poison gas that will kill him. So Leto must choose the right time to kill Baron Harkonnen too. While Robin gathers all the Atreides of enemies before checking the noble family's rooms, only to find them empty. He immediately runs outside and kills any enemy on his way until he manages to escape in an air kidnapped and are being taken away in an aircraft. The Harkonnen men discuss getting naughty with Jessica, and when Paul warns them not to touch his mother, they just smack him, ignoring his mother's sign on the men, but it doesn't work. The soldiers decide they're far enough into the desert so they'll throw Paul out, and a desperate Jessica signs to Paul to use the right pitch, concentrating. Paul uses it, the soldier removes Jessica's gag, allowing her to use the voice to make him kill all the other soldiers and release her. Then she kills him too and frees her son. Soon the air remotely. So Paul and Jessica can only watch how the city burns in the distance. Then they find a survival kit with a note from Yi saying this kid has an Atreides beacon. Paul also finds Leto wakes up in the presence of Baron Harkonnen. Yi also arrives and asks for his wife to be freed, but the Baron floats over and kills Yi instead. Then Harkonnen tells Leto that Leto to start whispering. The Baron activates his shield and leans in to hear him better, and Leto bites down on the false tooth to release the poison gas. Several guards die while a few run out in protective suits enter the room and discover the Baron is alive on the ceiling. Back to Duncan. He lands his aircraft and finds Kynes and yells at her for not warning them, but Kynes says she points out that House Raids was sent to Ors to die. So there's no neutrality here out in the desert. Paul and Jessica hide in the tent while the Wraiths speak in sounds regularly. Paul accidentally Cheney, who shows him a great battle in which Paul is fighting in a full suit and his blue eyes. Suddenly he becomes agitated. As he tells Jessica that he sees a holy war spreading across the universe fought and tries to calm him down, he reacts angrily, telling her that the Bene Gesserit made him a freak. She tries again and manages to hug him. As he says, he knows his father is dead. The duo leaves the tent, which has been covered in sand. At first they think a mouse caused the alarm, but at that moment, an aircraft lands with Duncan and Kynes, and Duncan kneels for Paul as he calls him ecological testing station where they can hide from the incoming storm. Paul tells Kynes that the great houses fear precisely what just happened to the Atreides, and only together they stand a chance against believe in the Messiah. Kynes says this is just superstition, but Paul begins mentioning things about her. He shouldn't know and says that he's seen her dream. He also says that as Emperor, the enemy finds the station and a battle starts between them and the Freeman guards. Duncan hears the noise and opens the door to find the battle in the hall. So he salutes. Duncan fights with amazing skill and brings down a few men, but sadly, he's outnumbered and eventually falls. Meanwhile, Kynes makes Paul and Jessica follow her through a back door. So the trio has to dodge the attack as they run. Suddenly, Duncan reveals he's alive and attacks the soldiers, giving his friends a chance to escape before he dies for good. One's outside to escape in the aircraft, giving Paul advice on how to fly through the storm and find the Freeman. Sadly, there's no room for her to come to as the duo flies away. Kynes plants a thumbworm that she intends to ride. Unfortunately, she's found and killed by Sardaukar soldiers. But before she dies, she bangs on the ground. The sandworm soon arrives and swallows Jessica and shoots missiles at them. But Paul flies into the sandstorm and the missiles can't track them anymore. However, the storm starts damaging the aircraft. So Jet to let go. Paul releases the controls and lets the storm guide the aircraft. But when they make it out, the wings fall off and they make a crash landing. Thankfully, they survive, to find the Freeman when they stop to rest. Paul has another vision of Cheney, who tells him to face his fears. He also sees another Freeman in the vision who tells him that he has much to learn using Duncan. Keep on going, and Paul teaches Jessica the sand walk to avoid attracting worms. Moments later, they accidentally step on drum sand, which makes a noise and gets the attention of a worm after them, but suddenly someone activates a thumper that attracts the sandworm's attention away from them. They climb on some nearby rocks for safety and discover they're surrounded by Freeman and tells his people not to touch Paul. However, Jamis says the boy looks like a weakling and can't be the Messiah if he needs rescuing. Stilgar explains that Paul is young and could. The Freemen immediately attack. But Jessica is a great warrior and captures STG, putting a knife to his throat. The Freemen back off and Jessica lets go of STG, who accepts. They both and discovers that Cheney is there, telling him she doesn't believe he's the Messiah. They should get moving. But Jamis objects to taking the strangers with them and challenges Jessica to a fight. Stilgar, who will fight in her name. And Paul volunteers as they prepare for combat. Paul has another vision of him losing, while a voice says that Paul must die for the Messiah to rise. Cheney comes. So she lends him a blade made out of warm teeth. Then Paul and Jamis begin to fight. Paul quickly gains advantage and puts his blade to Janice's throat, asking him to yield because no yielding and that one of them must die. Jamis fights ferociously, but again and again, Paul overpowers him without killing him. When a vision suddenly takes over Paul's mind, Jamis knocks him his destiny and gets up to deal a killing blow afterwards. Stilgar says that Paul is one of them now, while Jessica insists that Paul needs to get off the planet. However, Paul reaches, but for the strength of the Freemen, he says that his own road leads into the desert and that if the Freemen will have them, they will come. As the group heads into the desert, Paul and Jessica. Then Cheney